to be honest, as a reformed people pleaser who still has to fight the urge all the time and fail sometimes, this is really friggin' hard. We're often brought up being taught that being nice means never saying no, that our worth comes from how much we do for others, or that saying yes to every request put up in front of us is the only way to get ahead in jobs, businesses, or in life in general. And worst of all, we often believe, wrongly by the way, that being a people pleaser makes people respect us. Here's a radical thought. You are allowed to have boundaries. I know, right? What? But seriously, the truth is that for so many of us, especially those who were raised to be people pleasers, nurturers, caretakers, fixers, the idea of setting boundaries can leave us feel like we're being selfish or inconsiderate of others. That will be thought of as not nice or not caring. We worry about disappointing people. But here's the truth. Boundaries are not walls to keep each other out. They're more like those little foot-high garden fences. They allow us to define the limits we set, to give some control back to us over, and to protect our own mental and emotional well-being. And they are a critical piece of self-care. Setting boundaries is about communicating what we need in order to maintain healthy relationships, prioritize our mental and emotional well-being, and they are important to help us prevent burnout. So this week, we're diving into how to set and maintain boundaries without guilt, and why learning to say no can actually be one of the kindest things that we do. So let's dig into that. You know how life throws us curveballs? I believe in the incredible human capacity to heal and grow from life's challenges. We all face adversity in life, whether it's dealing with loss, overcoming personal challenge, or navigating mental wellness. Nobody gets through this journey of life without a few storms. Welcome to Transformative Journeys. I'm your host, Joanna LaRue, and through various challenges on my journey, including the devastating loss of my son in a workplace tragedy in 2006, I have navigated a messy path towards healing and rebuilding. It's been a journey of self-discovery that has taught me invaluable lessons about coping, healing, and transforming my experiences into tools for personal growth. Each week, I'll share my thoughts and insights and dig into strategies that can empower you to rediscover yourself, learn about transforming pain into power, building confidence to navigate life's challenges, and cultivating a life of meaning and joy. Join me on this journey of exploration and transformation. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button on your favorite platform and tap the bell icon to be notified when new episodes drop. Welcome back to Transformative Journeys with Joanna, and I'm your host, Joanna. So what do I mean by setting boundaries? And why does having boundaries even matter? Just a heads up, this is going to be another slightly longer episode, but stay with me, please, because I feel so strongly about the importance of setting and maintaining boundaries that I really want to leave you with not just an understanding of what that means, but to also leave you with some super clear strategies for defining your boundaries, for setting them, and most importantly, for maintaining them. Healthy boundaries define what we consider appropriate behavior, or what we're willing to or not willing to accept in our relationships, our work, and in our lives. And they differ from person to person. They can be guided by or influenced by our cultural background, our personality, and sometimes by the social environment or religious community that we grew up in. They can also be dependent on the environment we're in at the time. You're not likely to have the same boundaries in a business meeting that you would have at, say, a party or a bar, and vice versa. And Brené Brown, again, one of my favorite authors, defines boundaries as the limits we establish to define what behaviors and interactions we find acceptable in our relationships, work, and personal lives. And she says that daring to set boundaries is about having the courage to love ourselves, even when we risk disappointing others. And for me, boundaries are really about protecting my peace by defining what disrupts that peace and determining how I'm going to prevent others or situations from messing that up. And to be honest, as a reformed people pleaser who still has to fight the urge all the time and fail sometimes, this is really friggin' hard. We're often brought up being taught that being nice means never saying no, that our worth comes from how much we do for others, or that saying yes to every request put up in front of us is the only way to get ahead in jobs, businesses, or in life in general. And worst of all, we often believe, wrongly by the way, that being a people pleaser makes people respect us. Few of us want to disappoint or hurt the people that we love and care about. So if we're told, or our role model was prioritizing other people's needs, that saying yes was rewarded with love, or that in order to be accepted, we must keep others around us happy, over time, that behavior becomes less of a personality trait and more of a deeply embedded survival strategy. And lack of boundaries can lead to resentment, of course. It can also lead to excessive stress, disconnection from our own needs, emotional and mental burnout, and even physical illness. So how does it have all of those effects on us? Let's unpack some of the science a bit, because you know me, I love a little bit of neuroscience. So parts of our brain, including that old amygdala that I talk about so much, literally light up when we anticipate social rejection. And I'm not referring to light up in a positive way here. The amygdala has all kinds of roles in how we tick, but for what we're talking about today, it helps us identify potential dangers, like the possibility that someone might get mad at us, which to our lizard brain includes a potential for physical violence. It connects what we perceive to our fear response, like when we see the look of disappointment on someone's face when we say no to something. And it helps us respond to social cues, like perceived disappointment. And in situations that our lizard brain feels is threatening to us, for example, disapproval equals not being liked, equals concern that we might be kicked out of the tribe, the amygdala activates our sympathetic nervous system, which causes our heart rate to increase. It causes changes to our breathing pattern, and it triggers other psychological changes associated with our fight, flight, or freeze response. Which is why saying no can literally feel painful. And chronic stress from poor boundaries can lead to elevated cortisol levels, which can affect our overall immune response. So if you've ever wondered why saying no feels like you're about to be eaten by a dragon, you're not imagining it. So they are not selfish. They are self-respect. And they're necessary to not just our emotional well-being, but our physical well-being as well. Boundaries aren't self-centered. They are a necessary act of self-protection, and feeling guilty about setting and maintaining boundaries is not an indication that we're doing something wrong. It's our past self who taught us that meeting our own needs is selfish, is having a little anxiety attack because they're worried you'll get us kicked out of the tribe. But the truth is, guilt is a feeling, not a moral compass. You can feel guilty and still be doing the right thing. And in the Let Them theory, a book by Mel Robbins, she talks about the guilt we can feel even if we know we're doing the right thing. And she says we need to learn how to reframe our feelings of guilt as a sign that we're a caring, compassionate human, and also to understand that it just can't be avoided. And she suggests that instead of feeling guilty when someone is upset by your choices, we need to accept their emotions are their own responsibility, and that we need to learn to let them take ownership of those feelings. And also that it's important to then let me, as she puts it, move forward with making our decisions based on our values without feeling like a jerk. When we communicate our limits clearly, we're demonstrating honesty. And honesty builds trust within ourselves and with others too. And Brené Brown also says, clear is kind, unclear is unkind. Being wishy-washy about our boundaries or holding firm to them in one situation, but letting them bend or dissolve altogether in another situation leaves everyone feeling anxious, frustrated, and resentful. She says it perfectly when she says, when we fail to set boundaries and hold people accountable, we feel used and mistreated. That's why sometimes we attack who they are, which is far more hurtful than addressing the behavior or a choice. All right, real talk here. If saying no makes your stomach twist, but saying yes makes you want to cry in the shower later, we've got some work to do, my friends. My Bounce Back Blueprint is my free guide for when you've been stretched way too thin and need to claw back some sanity without turning into a jerk or ghosting everyone. It's full of practical tools and perspective shifts that helped me begin to learn to stop people pleasing and start rebuilding me. Grab it for free at transformativejourneys.ca or just scroll on down to the link in the show notes. So how do we begin to learn how to set healthy boundaries with kindness? But more importantly, how do we maintain those boundaries when there's pushback? Because you know there's going to be. Let me start by saying there are all kinds of boundaries. There are physical boundaries, like that anxious feeling when people stand too close to you, or the discomfort when you are touched or hugged by someone you aren't comfortable with, or even when someone looks at you in a way that makes you kind of uneasy. There are emotional boundaries involving things like how we want to be treated or listened to, the amount of emotional labor we are able or willing to take on, or what we're willing to share with others or allow to be shared about us. There are time boundaries around that which we are willing to spend our time on, or what we feel provides us with appropriate work-life balance. There are even self-imposed boundaries that we can set for ourselves around things like the type of and how much social media or news we consume, what kinds of products we buy, or what kinds of foods we'll eat, whether we'll engage in gossip or not. And maybe you already have a good idea of where you need to start establishing boundaries. Sometimes situations or our feelings around something make it abundantly clear that they make us uncomfortable, but often we're well past the "this is not a good decision for me" stage and staggering towards burnout or even illness before we really look back and say, I probably shouldn't have said yes to this. The first step in setting boundaries is to identify what makes you uncomfortable, whether that's physically, mentally, or emotionally. What leaves you feeling resentful when you consent to do it? What sorts of things leave you with a feeling of dread when you've agreed to do them? And what leaves you feeling drained when you did it, even though you didn't want to? Do the things that you've identified leave you feeling that way every time? Or are they enjoyable sometimes, but not if you're already feeling mentally, emotionally, or physically depleted? Do they need what's called a hard boundary, where what's acceptable or not acceptable is non-negotiable, and you've communicated clear consequences for crossing your boundary? And hard boundaries can look like you will not engage in conversations where someone speaks to you in a disrespectful tone. Or you will not be your friend's go-to pseudo-therapist whom she calls every time she needs to do a trauma dump. Because, as a side note, understand that we can't always be there all the time for other people's needs. Not only are their problems and emotions theirs to own, we need to remember that we need to take care of ourselves too. So another one might be that you will not be the go-to party planner for the family or the assumed location of events just because you have the most space. And when someone asks, you have the right to and will assert that no is a complete answer to requests. Or another one might be that you only accept physical contact when and from whom you feel comfortable, or even that physical contact is never acceptable to you, period. Or you might want to consider whether a soft boundary might be more appropriate, where you're willing to do something under certain clearly defined circumstances, but only under those circumstances. And examples of that might be, yes, you will take after hours calls, but only on the weekends that you are the on-call staff person. Or, yes, you will host a family get-together sometimes, but only once per year. Or every other year. Or only the years when you have and can take vacation prior, so you have plenty of time to prepare for it. Or just plain saying yes to things when you really want to do them, but saying no when you don't. I think you probably get it, right? So now it's time to define those limits, because remember, clear is kind, unclear is unkind. If you don't establish your boundaries in the first place, how the heck is anyone supposed to know when they're doing something that's not okay with you? And you need to be honest about this. We don't owe anyone a version of ourselves that's palatable to them. And we are not responsible for the emotions of other grown adults. So we need to be clear. We need to be direct. We need to use I statements instead of you statements. You statements tend to insinuate blame. So instead of saying, you can't talk to me that way, consider saying, I don't respond to that tone of voice. Or instead of, you make me uncomfortable when you do that. A better way to put that might be, this makes me uncomfortable and I need you to stop or I will leave. Which also then identifies the consequences of them not stopping the behavior or action. And more on that in a minute. So another one might be, instead of ghosting your needy friend, you might say, I know you're going through something crappy right now and want some support, but I'm going through some stuff too right now, and I just don't have the emotional bandwidth to be the support that you need. Instead of saying, you always expect me to host Thanksgiving, you might say, I'm not able to host this year. We are going to have to come up with an alternative location. And the I am not able to, that's a definitive no statement and does not require an explanation on your part. But you have the option to include extending kindness with your offer, to brainstorm an alternative solution with them. And then just simply, thank you for the invitation, but I can't make it. Stop. No explanation necessary. We want to make sure that we don't ask. We tell. And this one is really difficult for recovering people pleasers. We want to use direct language like, that doesn't work for me, or I can't do that. It's time to ditch the I'm sorry, but, and I hope you don't mind, but. There's nothing wrong with being respectful but assertive, both in your tone and your body language. And you don't usually need to be aggressive, but you shouldn't be passive about this either. Now comes the hard part, but practice makes progress. Yep, it's going to be harder to halt your mother trying to bulldoze her way through your boundaries than it is saying no to the next door neighbor you hardly know who invites you to a local garden party. And I got to tell you, I can feel my brain melting at the very thought of an afternoon tea or cocktail party with a bunch of people I hardly know engaging in small talk over tiny sandwiches and begonias. Anyway, sometimes boundaries lose power when we don't enforce and maintain them. So you need to be consistent about reinforcing what you will do or tolerate or won't. Repetition and calmly holding your ground are key to making boundaries effective. And you got to be prepared to reinforce the consequences that you've communicated, whether that's not answering the phone when your sister calls for the third time after the past 2 calls where she tried to convince you again of all the reasons why you should be hosting Easter dinner this year, or stepping back and holding your hand out as a physical barrier when someone invades your personal space, or literally turning your back and walking away from the gossip posse at work. And as difficult as it might be sometimes, if we assert or reassert our boundaries and people continue to violate those boundaries, we then need to be prepared to enforce the consequences, even if that means taking a break from people or ignoring the messages or calls for a while. And don't get me wrong here, this is not about giving someone the silent treatment or ghosting them. Licensed therapist Nedra Glover Tawwab says that, quote, "These behaviors are not about setting boundaries. It's emotionally abusive," unquote. This is about being honest and direct, telling them what you will need to do for your own well-being if they push your boundaries, and then doing it if they don't honor that. So an example might be that trauma dumping friend. You could say, "You know I only take emergency calls after 8 p.m. If you continue to drunk call me at 10 p.m. to cry about your ex, I'm going to stop answering your calls at night. I'd hate for that to happen and a real emergency occur, so please respect my boundaries around my time." And you're going to have to accept and sit with any discomfort that saying no or enforcing consequences causes inside of you, whether that's guilt, shame, remorse. Guilt and shame are usually the result of us taking responsibility for another person's emotions. And remember, we are not responsible for another grown adult's emotions, and we need to let them have and own their own emotions. It is not our job to make them comfortable with their emotions. And finally, let's talk quick about pushback, because we all know someone who will try to push or not respect our boundaries. Not everyone's going to like your boundaries. Some people are going to downright resent them. Sometimes that's because they benefited from you not having them, and now it means they aren't going to get their way anymore. And sometimes it's because they're jealous that you have the courage to have some boundaries. That never means that your boundaries are wrong. So get comfortable with some discomfort sometimes. And if someone reacts to your boundaries with anger, manipulation, or withdrawal, ghosting, that's a red flag. And that's data about that person. So if you have a notebook or paper handy, today I'm going to encourage you to start considering what your healthy boundaries might look like. Make it kind. Ask yourself, what is one thing that consistently makes me uncomfortable or leaves me resentful when I agree to do it against my better judgment? What is one thing I want to work on establishing a boundary for this week? This week, I talked about boundaries, why they can be so difficult, but why they're crucial to our well-being, how to set them, and more importantly, how to maintain them. Don't forget, for more practical tools to help you focus on you and begin to honor your right to honor who you are, including by setting boundaries, make sure you grab my bounce back blueprint at transformativejourneys.ca or just scroll down to the link in the show notes. As we wrap up, I want you to remember boundaries are not about building walls around ourselves. They are about re-empowering ourselves, not at the cost of or to control others, but to protect our time, our energy, and our well-being. If you're struggling with setting or maintaining boundaries, practice. Prepare your body language ahead of time. Practice it in a mirror. Write it out. Sometimes a boundary script can help you memorize what you want to say and make it easier for you to do it in real time. You can even practice verbalizing your boundary script with a safe person. You don't need to justify, apologize, or over-explain your boundaries. You just need to decide that you matter too. And that's not selfish. That's self-care. And my friends, that is also freedom. Thank you so much for being with me today. Come say hi on Instagram at transformativejourneys.joanna. If this episode brought you a bit of clarity or even made you feel just a little more seen, I'm so glad. Share it with someone or leave a review. It really does help me. Your support helps me keep creating free tools and honest conversations because no matter how much you love what you're doing, sometimes it takes a whole lot of metaphorical duct tape to hold it all together. If you'd like to toss a little love into the duct tape fund, you can support the podcast at buymeacoffee.com. I'll put a link to that in the show notes as well. And hey, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and tap the little bell on your favorite platform so you never miss an episode. Next week, we're going to be talking about energy leaks, where your power goes, and how to take it back. Until then, this is Joanna reminding you that it doesn't matter if you fall. What matters is how well you bounce. This is Transformative Journeys. See you next time. Hey, just a disclaimer. This podcast is for entertainment and informational purposes only and should not replace the advice of a medical or mental health expert. I'm not a licensed counselor or therapist, just a human with a mic and a story of growth and resilience. No degree, no fancy letters after my name. I'm a full-time student at the School of Hard Knocks, University of Life, where I figure I'll probably graduate when I take my last breath. In other words, I'm just Joanna, a fellow human being on my journey through this thing called life, and your guide on this transformative journey.